I think these are your people here. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for being with us, and thank you to Governor Whitmer. This is such an honor to get to be in conversation with you and on a topic that is really near and dear to me, and I know to you. So we are here together at the Guaranteed Income Now conference at a time when these kinds of programs, this movement is really under siege. Several states have banned guaranteed income programs, including folks in this room. There's a backlash against DEI nationally, lawsuits lodged against some of these programs. How are you thinking about the role Michigan plays and your administration plays in advancing racial equity through economic opportunity?
So first, let me say I'm a big fan of the 19th. I hope you all are as well, right?
Thank you.
You know, as I got to tell you, when I was elected governor in what year was it? 2018. One of the predominant reasons that I ran for governor, you know, I hadn't really thought about running for governor until we found out the magnitude and, you know, horrible outcome of the Flint water crisis. That really was one of the things that made me look around at who might run, who might not run, and I thought, you know, the people of Flint deserve better, and I think I can go in and try to fix this. And I'm proud of the work that we've done, but that really was what inspired me. But throughout my time as governor, the first term, we had an overwhelmingly Republican legislature, a pandemic, 28 recall attempts, not that I was counting. We had, you know, a plot. I mean, so many challenges.
Mm-hmm. Just little things.
You know what I'm talking about, right? And yet, coming in this term with a Democratic majority, it's a one-seat majority in both the House and Senate. We thought, you know, the people of Michigan hired us. We're not going to waste a minute. And so for the first 6 months of last year, we got an incredible amount accomplished, giving tax benefit to people who are raising kids and working full-time, the earned income tax credit, which we quintupled in Michigan. You know, free breakfast and lunch at school for all 1.4 million Michigan kids. Bringing down the cost of skills so that more people could get into better paying jobs without taking on a lot of debt. You know, so I think that our policies have really all been around the personal economy for Michiganders. And, you know, I know that good policy is good politics, but I think in this hyper-political moment, we're always aware that everything we champion, we're going to have to be able to defend as we go into another election as a part of the work that we've done, but really creating opportunity for people who for too long not had that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to talk about some of those opportunities a little more specifically. Let's go back to having this majority Republican legislature previously, where it was obviously much harder to get priority policies passed, yet you still managed to convince them to pass things like Michigan Reconnect and Futures for Frontliners, both of which gave Michiganders access to free college and degree programs. How did you make that bipartisan economic case?
Well, I had no choice. You know, the legislature had been controlled for 40 years by Republicans. The Senate had been. The House went back and forth a couple times, but mostly Republican controlled. And so I knew coming in, especially my first term, before we changed how we draw districts.
You can use that word. It's okay. Yep.
I don't want to say we gerrymandered. I was always in the minority, so they were gerrymandering, but. I knew that I was going to have to work with Republican leadership. And, you know, I think pulling in the business community to help make the case about when we invest in skills, I do it, you know, I think it's important because it's the right thing to do. It creates opportunity. And if you are a state of thriving people, you're a state that's thriving. The business community sees it as important to their business models and their ability to be successful and to thrive. And so making that economic argument, the more traditional economic argument, was really important when we went to go cobble together the votes. It was not easy, but pulling in allies like that, because all the advocates, social, you know, the people that work on so many issues that are represented in this room were helpful with one, you know, particular mindset, but we had to break through and talk to the others. And so really focusing on how do we make that more statewide economic argument. And that's why we got it done. And we've seen, you know, I've met so many people in this state who were graduating because they were able to just get that $8,000 barrier taken care of. Or, you know, So I just, it's life-changing for people. That's what motivates me, but I recognize not everyone's similarly motivated, and that's why having these non-traditional partners were really important.
I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the Michigan Guarantee. Now that you do have a Democratic legislature, something that would make pre-K and community college free for all students in the state. It has been amazing to look on the state's website and hear the testimonials of people who've been able to go on to their dream careers after getting free education. How do you think about what a state like Michigan or any state's responsibility is to its population?
Well, I look at Michigan's stagnant population. I mean, we're growing, but not nearly at the clip that every other state is. We're one of the slower. We're one of the older in the country. We also have got some incredible and unique assets. 21% of the world's fresh surface water. Wonderful institutions of higher education, from our community college system to our higher education system. The highest concentration of engineers in the country.
Wow.
And we're a very diverse state. This is a part of who we are. People came from around the world for an opportunity here because you could get into the auto industry and walk right into the middle class and buy a home up north as a vacation place. That was what we offered. And so as we look to, how are we going to attract young people and families into Michigan? We say you've got universal pre-K and 2 years after high school covered. Michigan would be the first state in the country to get that done. It would be a compelling argument. It would help us upskill. And so I think that it helps us achieve all of these goals. Now, I'm negotiating right now with our legislature. So if you like the Michigan Guarantee, make sure your legislators know. We've got a 1-seat majority in both chambers, and so there's no guarantee that
it's a narrow road.
That what I put on what I put out there, we're going to get done, and your voices are really matter. And so I hope that, I know this is not a shy group, I heard you backstage introducing yourself to one another before we got started, but right now is a really important time, so I hope that you will reach out to your legislators and let them know how important universal pre-K and the community college guarantee is.
At the 19th, we like to say that all issues are women's issues. One of the things I love hearing you talk about is how all issues are actually economic issues. And that could be putting in place new gun laws or protecting civil rights for queer people or affirming abortion rights, all of which you and your colleagues did, in 2023 alone. How do issues like these that might not come across as economic issues, that some might think of as just social issues, how do they tie to economic opportunity?
As I think about, our fight for reproductive freedom, we amended our Constitution in the last election. I've also, since then, with this new legislature, been able to take trap laws off the books. Toward the end of the campaign, I kept getting the question, are you talking too much about abortion? Shouldn't you be talking about the economy? And I'm a pretty disciplined messenger. I'm not quick to get angry. I've got a long fuse. I take a lot of crap before I hit back. But it was about the 1,000th time I got that question, and so I said, listen, if you don't think abortion is about the economy, you probably don't have a uterus. And one of my people on my campaign team, their eyes got large, and they said, we didn't practice that line. I'm like, listen, the most profound economic decision a woman and her partner or family will make over the course of their lifetime is whether and when to bear a child. And so it is about the economy. It's about women being able to get into the workforce. It's about, making sure that we are supporting our youngest people so that they can be successful and productive in our economy. I would submit the same is true for LGBTQ rights. Bigotry is bad for business. Michigan is competing with so many other states for young talent and investment. And so being a welcoming place, being a place where every person is respected and protected under the law, being a place where individuals can make their own decisions about their bodies, being a state that we enacted the Crown Act so you can't get discriminated against for wearing natural hair. I mean, yes, but this is, all of these pieces are a part of a global, a much bigger economic strategy. And I think we've got to figure out and get really comfortable talking about it in that way because the people that are motivated because they think it's the right thing to do, they're going to be there. It's the others who are wondering, who need to hear that kind of, that that vantage point as well.
Well, I live in Austin, Texas, and Texas has become a complicated place to live. And I would imagine the Austin to Detroit pipeline seems to be growing and moving in your direction. So let's
come on up.
Yeah. The weather is way
not
nicer.
105.
Yeah, exactly.
Not 105 here, is it? Right.
No, it's gorgeous. So it is, speaking of what is and isn't a women's issue or an economic issue, it is perplexing to me that some people still think about caregiving as a women's issue, as a social issue, when it is so clearly an economic issue and so tied to the ability of women to contribute to the workforce. How have you worked to address the cost and disproportionate effect of caregiving? And can the government pick up some of the slack that, candidly, women have been forced to carry?
Yeah, I mean, we know that the caregivers, there are some wonderful male caregivers, but by and large, it is women who are doing this work. And it is women of color, frankly, especially in the paid caregiving setting. We are fortunate that there are so many women who are willing to do these hard, sometimes thankless and very, challenging jobs, and yet we got to recognize that that is a service to the state, to the economy that is being performed, and it is an important one. It is not just about women and girls. It is about boys and men, too. I was a member of the sandwich generation my first term in the legislature, and some of you are nodding, you know the phrase, but for those of you who don't, I was sandwiched between two generations of my family for whom I was the primary caregiver. My mom, who at 59 died from brain cancer, and I was taking care of her, and the daughter that I had 2 months before my mom died, who I was also caring for. And it was the hardest time in my life. And I had supports that most people don't have. And that's why the Michigan Caregiver Tax Credit, which I've proposed and I'm trying to get through in this budget, is really important to give people who are doing that important work of caring for a young person in their family or someone who needs the extra care or someone toward the end of their life, give them a little bit of a break, recognizing that there's value and importance in that work. And a tax credit was one way that I thought we could do that. But paying our caregivers more who are in the work setting is something that we've been able to ratchet it up, but I think we need to do more.
Well, the amazing woman who did my makeup before I came over here has a 6-month-old at home and cares for her 100-year-old grandparents, and she said she wanted to say thank you, by the way, for the work you're trying to do to help her get reimbursed for that work. So, yeah, she was awesome. So one other person who is trying to make the Michigan economy a campaign issue is Donald Trump. As I was actually boarding my flight for Detroit, I got an email from his campaign. Yes, unfortunately, I have to be on the email listserv, saying he's headed to town. He's coming for a roundtable on Saturday to talk about the ways that he says the economy isn't working for Michigan families. So if he were standing in this room, I'd pray for his safety, but also, how would you set him straight?
You know what, I would say, right now in Michigan, we're seeing incredible growth and strength in our economy. And thanks to Joe Biden and the IRA and the CHIPS Act, we're onshoring supply chains. We're shoring up, auto jobs, which so much of our economy is dependent on. We're helping people save more in energy, and we're building up affordable housing. So I would say the best thing for our economy would be a second Biden term. But good to know he's coming. Every time he comes, I get more threats. So that's something to look forward to.
Yeah. Yep. I want to talk a little bit about what Democrats have been able to achieve in Michigan since they gained full control of the legislature for the first time since the 80s. And I want to talk about cost cutting in particular. At the Mackinac Policy Conference here in Detroit a few weeks ago, you were focused really on lowering the cost of housing and energy. Why are those two priority areas for you?
Well, we know that in the average person's budget, the biggest chunk of how you spend your money, not really discretionary money, right, is a place to live and keeping the lights on. And so we were able to use some of the incredible investment that the Biden-Harris administration's gotten done and really pour it into building up our affordable housing stock. Most of our housing, my staff wrote this, and they're young, but they said most of our housing is over 50. I'm like, not everything over 50 is decrepit, okay? I'm 52, and it's going okay right now.
It's going great. Yeah.
But it's over 50 years old. It's not up to code. I mean, in some places like Detroit, there are needs where we can bring old stock up to code, so it's investing in and refurbishing. In other places, even in Detroit or in rural areas, there's vacant land that we can build new housing stock. So it's not one solution for every community, but it's recognizing, all right, we need 115,000 units. Our goal is spring of 2020 or summer of 2026. We up that goal from 75,000, do it the end of next year because we're ahead of schedule. And we've got resources because of President Biden's work. I would add, on bringing down utility costs, we're putting, I think, $360 million, federal dollars, into helping people weatherize, making sure that they've got appliances that consume less energy, solar for all. And these were all programs from the federal government, thanks to the Biden administration. And so this is how we can bring down the highest, cost in a household for as many people as we can. So.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the national spotlight. For a moment, they mentioned it on stage, and we were backstage, and you're like, oh, boy. I was supposed to be on a family vacation right now, and when I was asked to be part of this conversation, we did like a big family switcheroo and changed all the flights and changed all the reservations because every woman in my family was like, well, you have to go interview the woman who might be the first woman president. and I have to ask, I just want to ask what that anticipation is like, what that kind of pressure is like around a prospective candidacy. How do you do your day job and also deal with that sort of, on your shoulders?
I ignore it. I think if there's something that I cultivated from my mother, she was a trailblazer. She was an attorney at the Attorney General's office. They didn't have many women back in those days. She was getting ready to go to court one day, and someone said, Sherry, you cannot wear pink to court. I'm looking at you in your beautiful pink suit. And my mom said, fuchsia is my power color, and went into court and killed it. But she was a trailblazer. But she also was able to, I think, compartmentalize and stay focused on what mattered. And I share the story about being a sandwich generation because I really think that period of my life forged who I am today. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of distraction, but being able to stay focused on what you can do now is the best thing I can do for any future possibilities, is to do a damn good job in this moment. And so I ignore it. That's what I do. I am a co-chair for the Biden campaign. I'm doing a lot of surrogate work, and I'm a spokesperson on a lot of fronts, and I show up in his place at events to help spread the message on top of, governing the state of Michigan right now. So I think all I say to myself is get up, do the best job you can every single day, and fall back asleep at night.
Well, the whole reason the 19th exists is because Hillary Clinton lost the election, and regardless of what you thought about Hillary Clinton, I was at home on maternity leave with a baby girl in the state of Texas and wondering why our nation wasn't ready for a woman in the White House. Do you think the nation is ready for a woman in the White House, whether it's you or somebody else?
I do. Did you say hell yes? What she said. Yeah. I do. I really do. I think it is wild to see what nations have had female leaders.
Mexico now.
And for us to be so far behind. And we've seen the rise of so many women leaders. I did Hillary's podcast with her a couple years ago, and I thanked her. She walked through the fire first and dealt with a lot of ugliness that she didn't deserve, she didn't earn, and yet made it easier for many of us to walk through now and show up as ourselves. And I thanked her for that because when I started my political career, I was always trying to figure out how do you make everyone comfortable? And so I was continually reassessing how I show up. And I remember talking to a woman, Deidre Bounds, some of you might know her, African-American woman who was just phenomenal. And she just said, we were on a call, I was raising money, and I asked her for some support, and she said, yes, I'll support you. But just remember this, show up as you are. Don't try to be anything other than who you are. People will be able to identify with that, and that will serve you well. And I thought that was maybe one of the best pieces of advice I got. Are we ready for a woman president? So long as it's the right woman.
Yes, exactly. Well,
okay, you're in trouble now.
Or maybe hired, one of the two, right? Well, speaking of showing up as you are, you have a book coming out next month, your first book. Give us a sneak peek. What is one thing we will learn about you that Michiganders don't already know about you? And that book comes out July
9th. Yeah,
okay,
yeah. So one of the questions I get asked the most when I'm traveling around Michigan or outside of our state is, how do you stay optimistic and positive with all the ugliness that's come your way? How do you do it? Like, people would ask me, why do you want to run for a second term after they're trying to kill you? So I thought, this is going to be a heavy year. This is going to be a hard 5 months ahead of us going into this next crucial election. It is going to be hard. And I thought, if I can put some light out into the world, right now is a good time to do it. So it's a short book. It's only 30,000 words. You can read it in a couple hours. And it's things I've learned in my life that I have applied to navigate, a different scenario in these last 6 years. And I think the first chapter is don't let bullies define you. And so I talk a little bit about some of my nicknames that I've gotten over the years that I wasn't crazy about when I was in middle school. You know how middle school boys are? Or how my father, after I knocked out my front teeth at church camp of all places, started calling me Gravity Gretchen because I fall down a lot. Or my most famous nickname, that woman from Michigan, or Big Gretch. But talking about how, I embraced Big Gretch, even though growing up, as my brother says, you would have murdered me if I'd have called you Big Gretch growing up. And he's right, I would have. But it was bestowed on me by the people of Detroit during a really, really hard time. And so that woman from Michigan was given to me by President Trump as an insult. But we turned it into like a cause of action. It spurred this whole Etsy community, right? Selling, T-shirts and hats and coffee mugs, and people sent them to me. But, and so it's like embrace, and then I wore it when I did an interview with Trevor Noah. And, I thought that don't let another person define you. We define who we are. And so embracing Big Gretch, I got to be a part of defining that, but it was really bestowed on me. That woman from Michigan, I took it and we made it our own. My theory about bullies is you take their weapon and make it your shield. And so that's one of the chapters.
Great. Can't wait to read it. So we're here in a room full of people who are doing just extraordinary, life-changing work for so many people who have committed their lives and their careers to advancing economic opportunity, to eroding racial differences. This is also really hard work in a really hard time. And again, as I said earlier, we are seeing this backlash in this space. What is your advice? What are your recommendations to this room full of people doing this work in this moment?
Well, I think that, these fights are worth having. They're important, and it's crucial that we keep showing up and not let anyone distract us or demoralize us. 10 years ago, I was in the legislature, and the Republicans were passing a bill that made it even more difficult for women to access abortion care. And in a floor debate at the last minute, I decided to share my experience as a sexual assault survivor. It was not premeditated, it was off the cuff. But I thought, they're not even holding hearings, so women can't even go and testify, or medical providers can't testify, and they need to look at the face of a woman that they're impacting. And I shared it. It didn't change a single vote that day, and I was about as depressed as I've ever been. By the time I drove into my office the next day, people had reached out. I mean, thousands of calls and emails and faxes. This was really before we were all texting. I said, I did a Rachel Maddow interview within that next day or so, and I said, I'm in this for the long haul. Last year, on the 10-year anniversary of that, I signed the bill that repealed it. And so I think what I'm trying to convey is these are important fights, and they are worth having, and they are absolutely winnable. Sometimes it takes longer than it should. Sometimes it's harder than it should. Sometimes the allies you expect aren't where they should be. But we can win these fights, and I will be arm in arm with you every step of the way.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you so much to Governor Whitmer for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, all. Thanks again.